I hope so and wish they do, because we have had a lot of failed economic ideas that have actually caused harm, and sometimes the same people continue to be the ones that are dictating what keeps going on. The Washington Consensus didn't really understand meaning, open markets, free markets, minimal government, didn't understand that there is no capitalism and no markets without functional democratic institutions and legal systems.
Your question is about moral responsibility of economists. Yes, we have a huge one. Because by turning a blind eye to the hidden assumption that a solution exists before we can find it, we are replicating the intellectual subterfuge and crime that has led to enormous costs being inflicted upon humanity by the financial sector.
Economists can go in different ways, and to some extent, they should take some responsibility if they get it wrong. But in terms of being held accountable for the outcomes of their practice, of their prescriptions, that may be going a little bit far. I mean, I don't think we should be jailing economists who got it wrong, because I don't think they're allowed to get it wrong. But certainly they should take some responsibility. Certainly lessons should be drawn when they get it wrong.
In that kind of question itself, there is also some kind of medieval attitude to the economist as a predictor who does something chemical, guesses from insights in books, and then gives advice. If the advice is wrong, his head is cut off. Responsibility, from my point of view, is a completely different thing. This is not a punishment for the mistake of any particular person. Responsibility for a politician and an economist is the ability to have a broad global vision, to understand the interconnection of everything happening in the world, as well as to understand how recommended and accepted decisions participate in these global connections. Responsibility is also closely linked to values and goal settings.
In terms of the larger accountability of economics for all of these much larger crises in our society, we don't need to hold people accountable. We just need people to change how they operate. We just need people to wake up. The idea here is not to make people feel bad. The idea here is not to sort of put people in jail for these crimes. They are crimes against humanity in many cases, in key respects. There's no need to do any of that.
I think within the profession, we get censorship and we get the elevation of those who've made mistakes, are not isolated for that, are not denigrated for that. They tend to be rewarded for their errors, so, and I think that means economics is not being held fully accountable. And how we hold economists transparent is by exposing them and exposing the sector and opening up the sector to more alternative ideas.
We're dealing with a world of contested data, contested models. Of course, we're going to get things wrong. That's part of the nature of it, and that shouldn't inhibit people from being part of the debate. So I think we should encourage people to think. We should encourage debate. We shouldn't have to have one point of view, but we should make sure that we are transparent where interests lie. And I think that an ethics committee would serve the industry as it does, or the discipline, I should say, as it does other disciplines very well.
Ultimately, I would actually postulate that the accountability should be held by the intellectual individuals, right? So it is those people that actually select their spin doctors or select the advice of economists. in order to come up with their policy decisions. And it's ultimately, eventually, them who should be held accountable.
So those two groups, strategic consultants and economists, I think kind of get a little bit of a free pass. And I'm not sure there's a way to hold them accountable. I think the only solution we have is that the people that are kind of listening to them have a degree of sophistication to understand what's fit for purpose and what has to be thought about more broadly.
Economists and everyone else should be held accountable for their advice. There's no point in constantly following the advice of a field that's constantly wrong. Every single economics conference I attend ends with someone saying we should really invest more in education. I think every economist can agree that that is generally a good idea.
Yeah.
And yet no one ever does it because the payoff is beyond an electoral cycle. So I do think that when economics and politics coincide, which they often do, then economists can give great advice, and yet it's not politically viable. And that's the planet that we're living on.